Okay, so the purpose of this video is to expand a little bit further on some of the concepts that I came up with in my other video, or I shouldn't say came up with, but I tried to explain in my other video. Um, in this video, I'm doing something a little different, and I'm sort of compositing a lot of that information together to present what I feel to be a more easily digestible form of all that information. So this is my take on it, okay? This is like a director taking something, like I've explained this before, and again in another video, like one of my earlier ones, that this is like a director taking something that some other creative artist, someone else's property, intellectual property already created, and then like interpreting it in their own way and trying to add and subtract and make their own version of it. Okay, so this is like a creative license that I'm taking here. What I encourage you to do, therefore, is if any of this makes sense to you, go out and try it and apply it. And at the end of the video, I'm going to give you a few examples of how you can do that. But and like what to look for. But this is going to be the main thing that you're going to want to look for. Okay, are these three traits in people? And the reason why is because I touched upon this in my last video, but there are different layers to people, okay? And we develop in primarily two different stages, which is just childhood and adulthood, okay? And I won't get into like seniority and all that yet, because that's a completely different subject. But for just, because I don't expect a lot of like seniors to be watching this video, but whatever, so this is mainly for like, us boomers and zoomers. So if you're a kid or an adult, this is for you. Basically, well, it's actually not for kids, but whatever. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. The point is, in children, okay, you wouldn't have quite enough like experience in life and cognitive development to expect to see a full-blown adult personality. So in a child, you're not going to be looking for the same kinds of traits that would define identity the same way you would in an adult, okay? So what you're going to look for in children is primarily things that are chemical and behavioral driven. So chemical and behavioral patterns. And these can be observed as early as infancy, like 6 months old to 12 months, and then toddlers and like little kids in preschool and in kindergarten and in elementary and so forth. Okay, and a lot of these characteristics, if they are extreme and unadjusted for, okay, become harder to compensate for when the child enters into the adult world, and then become the source of neurotic disorders and mental disorders of all kinds of this. Or they might already have been because of some kind of mental disorder that they have like some kind of imbalance, and you see an extreme level of one of these. So what happens here, I'll go over these briefly, okay? And these are great because they carry into adulthood, right? So this is like the primal stuff from which personality is derived. This is temperament, and this comes from genetics and biology. It's prior to any environmental conditioning. You're born a certain way, and then environmental conditioning, trauma, and the parent's guidance or influence can cause these traits to be repressed or redirected, but these are always present at birth in some extent and everyone has them, and you have like a certain you have them like to a certain strength, so they're weak or strong, okay, and everybody has them to certain strengths, just like certain people are really tall, and then some people are even taller, and then some people are really short, and some people are like super short. So it's like there's a scale to each of these, but we all have them. They're universal, but we're not all the same, and you can observe these very easily because they're present even in children. Okay, so this is like really, like, you can see this in adults. Okay, so activity level, and this is all very like intuitive, I hope, because it's like it's what it says. Okay, so like activity level is literally what you're looking for in people, like how energized are they, motivated, doing stuff, engaging with other people. We use sometimes you'll hear the term extroverted used, but I'm using this because I think this is more like really what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about like activity level, like how much are they actually up and about and doing stuff, whatever that may be, whether it's working in Blender or I'm just drawing from my own personal pool of colleagues for examples here. Like, say you're working in Blender all day, you're working on projects, or you are just talking to people constantly and engaging with people and socializing all the time and doing things social, or and video games that are social with other people, like multiplayer in nature. Whatever it is that you're doing that shows you're actually active and doing stuff, okay, and not just kind of moping around and being really low energy and depressed and kind of like, in your own mind and not wanting to do anything, okay, and just like imaginary land all the time and feeling strong emotions or something, which again, you might think, oh, well, that sounds familiar. Is that introversion? Exactly. So that's what this is, though. What we're really talking about when we talk about extroversion and introversion is this. Okay, it's activity level. It's like, how are you engaging with the environment? Are you actually engaging with the environment? Do you want it to come to you? Do you want to go to it? Is there this uniting happening between you and stimulus? Like, are you drawn to the stimulus? Do you apprehend the stimulus and go out seeking it and enjoy it and have this, like, a dopamine driven interaction, essentially, is what this is. Dopamine driven, right? Just think dopamine, right? Dopamine. Okay. And then emotional stability, serotonin. SSRIs, right? Antidepressants, antipsychotics, and shit like that. Oh yeah, bros. Emotional stability. Okay, this is the next thing you look for in people, and what this essentially means is like, how sensitive are you to pain, and what form does it take? Some people's pains are different than others. Like, we all have our demons, and some people's pain, like what they're sensitive to, is not always the same as some other people. Like, some people are more sensitive to a certain stimulus than another person would be, and then they interpret that stimulus in a negative way when the other person's just like, I don't get it, in the presence of the same stimulus. So it varies by individual, and it varies by in intensity. So you have some people that are just really emotionally stable in most ways, but then maybe they have something that really pushes them over in some specific sense. But they're still overall emotionally stable. Okay. And so it's like, and it's the same thing with the activity level. Like, some people might find certain things they're really active in, and then others they don't really do at all. And so then overall, maybe they're not that active, but they're only active in like one specific way. Or vice versa, they might be active in many different, areas of their life, but then there's just like one thing they're kind of neglecting, or a few things that they just don't care about. Like, maybe they don't really care about socializing all the time, but they do want to be engaged in like doing stuff and interacting with other forms of stimulus. So they're still kind of extroverted, just not in a social way, right? So that's what this work. All these are like granular like that. Keep that in mind, right? They're all granular like that. And they're visible in like infants and toddlers and shit, right? So like, the level of, again, wanting to go out and be stimulated and have attention and give attention and this sort of thing even infants and toddlers behave differently on this axis. And same with emotional stability. Some babies are fussy. They're really fussy. And so every little thing gets to them. And initially what happens is you see people react one of two ways, which is with anger or fear. Anger or fear. That's what emotional stability is how frustrated you get, like how easily you get frustrated, and then what do you do with that? Do you go in the direction of anger or fear? And that's fight or flight, folks. If you've never heard of fight or flight, I don't know what planet you're from, but like, what happens is some kind of like non-dopamine, thing that disrupts your serotonin comes in, boom, HPA access fires off. Now we go from recreational mode, which is feed and breed, to survival mode, okay, which is fight or flight. And now fight, stand my ground, is an extroverted, right, high activity level thing, and is going to require me to spend a lot of energy. And so then the opposite, if I don't have a high activity level and I'm kind of introverted maybe, then I'm going to be afraid and I'm going to try to run away, okay? Neither of those can be sustained indefinitely. You can only fight so long before you burn out, and you can only run for so long before you burn out. Like, you can only tread water for so long before you drown, right? So what happens is fear turns into anxiety, and anger turns into like stubbornness, and then eventually they spin out, and they both turn into like sadness and suicide. So that's where that goes. Okay, and everybody has their own levels in this. Even into adulthood, it carries over. This is the foundation of personality. It comes before it. Like, you have this even as a baby. Okay, and then parents have to like handle this somehow. They have to be aware of this and like know how to like help you grow. Now then, with attention span, okay, this is like how well you can focus and have impulse control and like delay gratification in order to complete a task. And your mental, a bit fortitude in that sense, like how you can juggle numbers. And people with a good attention span are like good with math, and they're good with like constructive tasks and all kinds of things. They can even be more creative. They tend to be more empathic because they can focus on people for, better, and pick up details in their interactions with people and things like that. So attention span is pretty deep. Okay. It's not just impulse control. It's also your mental focus on and ability to absorb details in your observations. It's like the depth and breadth of your attention. Depth as well as breadth, both. So diverse and focused. So you get everything. So people that are good at this, and because that's the same thing with the others, like where it's granular, where you can have like maybe you're the sort of person whose attention span is broad, and so you're like you know a lot of trivia, but you don't have a deep penetrating knowledge of any particular subject. So your attention span is broad but not deep. So that's how you can have like different variations within like subtypes with it. But generally speaking, you know, there's like a level of overall proficiency with each of these traits. Okay. And that's how you can get different temperaments in babies. Okay, so different mixtures of these. Like each one can be really strong or really weak to some extent. That forms the foundation of personality, because this stuff is biological and genetic. Like it's identifiable even in split twin studies of identical twins that are born to the same parents and then divided, and they have the same. They're identical. So then they exhibit the same temperament even when so it's not environmental. That didn't come from the environment. They had the same temperament to begin with. And then parents can drive temperament. So people that are screeching about nature versus nurture and saying, well, what about like trauma and stuff like that? Yeah, you're of course, yeah, calm down. Trauma and parental guidance and or neglect can absolutely influence temperament in the early age. Childhood, up to like I want to say, 8, like 7, 8, or 9, somewhere in that range. It varies per individual, like how fast you grow up, which would probably have more to do with like intelligence or something, which is a totally different measure, totally different thing. It's not on here, but basically, probably maybe it should be, right? But whatever. I don't think that's part of your temperament. We're talking about mood, like temperament. Okay, intelligence is a different thing. But how will you mature and develop an adult personality and adapt your temperament to the environment? Okay, so that's the next phase, and that's the end of childhood and the emergence into young adulthood. So young adulthood begins once the individual has developed a stable adult personality pattern. Okay, and a stable adult personality pattern is not 3 traits, it's 5. And that's when we move over into the Big 5 model and we use the ocean model, because humans start out rather primitive in the sense that as children we're just working with sort of a basic set of tool set and we're putting things together. But once we become more complex as individuals, we've had more experiences to process, and I've had a few things to think about for a while. We come up with an adult personality that has 5 dimensions instead of just 3, and they're totally different. Although you can see how some of them derive from this, like extroversion in the ocean model, that's the E, derives from activity level. But there's also a little hint of emotional stability and attention span in it. Okay, so each of the 5 traits are sort of a mixture of these, and recombination into 5. And so like conscientiousness, which is the C, which is like how organized and responsible and workaholic you are, right, and perfectionist, is sort of tied to attention span and a little bit of activity level, you see, and emotional stability. And so then like neuroticism, where you are like constantly afraid and anxious and you need emotional attachments to things, and you're also like really sentimental and obsessive and compulsive, obviously it goes to emotional stability. So you see how they're rooted in temperament, but they become more complex when you move into adulthood, because they take on a more social, psychological aspect rather than just a behavioral and like chemical driven aspect. These are really just chemicals, okay? Like I said, like this is like the activity level is essentially just it's essentially dopamine driven, right? Because dopamine is the chemical that kind of draws you to things, either processes or objects or something, and you become attracted to things. Because they, not necessarily because they cause you pleasure, but because there's the anticipation of pleasure. That's what people also mistake with dopamine. Dopamine is not the source of pleasure. It's not the pleasure chemical. It's the marker, like a flag, that your brain assigns to the anticipation that something will bring pleasure, and then like flags that thing as like source of pleasure, right, as potential source of pleasure. And then you make the conscious decision to go then seek out that thing and engage with it because your brain is telling you that you should. That's what dopamine does. Okay, it's a little different. It's like than just a source of pleasure. It is not itself the source of pleasure. That comes from like other things, like in your body, like other chemicals. But anyway, so dopamine, serotonin, and then what's called norepinephrine or noradrenaline, which is like the orientation, like uh, alert chemical in your brain that helps you to focus and stay awake and alert and like accelerated in a sense, like it kind of like accelerates attention span and mental tempo. And that's like norepinephrine, and it can lead to anxiety and stuff and stress and a higher trigger rate of um, the sympathetic nervous system over time if it's too much. So it can actually lead to emotional instability if it's like overdone. Because then you're too like alert, you're too perfectionistic in a sense, right? Then it can be neurotic, like it's compulsive. Anyway, so I guess I'll make another video going into adult personality next, because this video was really just to emphasize temperament and explain the difference between the two, setting up for the next video, I think. Because I want to hammer down on this, because so the takeaway, like I said earlier, there's going to be some like things you can do to prove to yourself that this is legit, like you can actually just apply this, okay? Is look for this in people that you know. Like in the other video I made, I said you can use a homework assignment, try to grade people in their strengths and weaknesses and the various traits that I told you about. Okay, but now I want you to do that with these, and don't even worry about those other ones. Don't worry about all the other garbage I kind of just like skimmed through really quickly in my other video. Focus on these alone, because these can't be faked. Okay, like since this is biological and chemical driven, and the foundation upon which a personality is derived as an adaptation to deal with this, like you're dealt a hand, right? Like you have a certain level of strength and weakness in each of these. And then in life, you will be faced with various situations where your level of proficiency in these is not sufficient or is not adapted in a way that allows you to deal with the situation and not feel dissonant, okay, so or not feel like pain or something. And so to sort of correct the situation and fix the problem, you have to change these characteristics in yourself. And as children, we find that extraordinarily hard to do without parental guidance or medication or something, or social guidance or some kind of outside influence. It's not, in other words, nurturing. So without that, without trauma or parental guidance, then the temperament will just hold fast, and you have to do it yourself. And again, because intelligence is not a part of this, some people are smart enough to do that themselves, and they can make self modifications as they grow up. So there's a lot of like correlative studies to show that people that are highly intelligent can kind of like figure their way out of the maze. So they can adapt their own temperaments over time and grow more stable adult personalities that help them cope with the adult world. But then people that aren't as intelligent don't really understand or aren't able to figure out what parts of themselves are the source of the issue, and they remain unconscious of those aspects of themselves, but still driven by them even in their adult life. And then it becomes more and more and more emotional instability, and they become more and more neurotic and might even have like mental health issues. Anyway, yeah, this is stuff that you should be able to identify in your friends and family like right away, like very easily, just almost at a glance. You can see when someone is highly active and wanting to engage with other people around them versus um, withheld and not doing that. Somebody who can like listen to you talk for an extended period of time, even about a subject that they're only partially interested in, versus somebody that's just like, I can't handle this, I'm out. Like, you talk too much, shut the fuck up, bounce. Someone with like no attention span on specific topics, or maybe they can focus like that on specific things like gooning or video games or something, but they can't do that with a scientific or academic subject that they have no interest in, that doesn't seem practical in their life or something like that. Okay, so then they just don't have much of an attention span in certain things. As an adult, it becomes more complicated what those things are. That's what I'm saying, like as you get older. But as a kid, it would just be in general. It would just be like, I don't give a shit about anything. I just want to have fun, right? And lack of like delayed gratification and impulse control is not something that they have. So then they have like a low attention span. And then later in life, they lack conscientiousness, and they tend to be less responsible and more just lazy. and procrastinating. Anyway, so you're looking for these three traits in people and you're trying to identify them based on their behavior. That's what's key here. This is not even subjective because it's just observed behavior. You're watching. Are they paying attention? Do they pay attention to the same thing for an extended period of time and then move to the next thing, give it the proper amount of attention? And the other is it the opposite, right? Some people are obsessive. Are they giving way too much attention to something and not able to take their mind off of it and focus on something else? Okay. And then emotional stability, okay, or how are they handling stress? Are they stressed all the time, or are they like relatively chill and happy and not having to deal with stress? And what is stress? What do I mean by that? Are they angry or are they scared? Fight or flight. Remember, are they in survival mode? Are they scared or anxious, or are they angry or passive aggressive and resistant or something? Like, are they are they fussy? Okay, that's emotional stability. How fussy are people? And and then their activity level is how vocal they are, how literally physically active, getting up and moving around and engaging in things and clicking buttons and doing stuff and talking to people and in like movement. So movement, volume level, expressiveness, like visual intensity, everything. Like they're expressive, they're present, they're there. Okay, and they're just like sending out ripples of sensory because they're expressing their being. Okay, activity level. Look for those three things in people and tell me what you see. I guarantee these are going to be as easy as hell to spot, even in complete strangers. Like if you just look at people, even without engaging with them, you can just observe complete strangers and see this level in people in various contexts. You'll have to think too about context because in some contexts people have a lower activity level than they would in a different context, like at a party or something. So it depends on what the situation is. Always keep that in the back of your mind. But that being said, overall, people have a sort of stable pattern to their general strength or weakness in these different traits in all situations. Okay. And they might have some they favor more than others, or there might be some like general variance here or there, but there will still be like an overall pattern. But and that might take a bit of getting to know them more. But on the surface level, at just, eye shot, you can identify these pretty quickly in most people, like within 5-10 minutes of conversation or something. At least some of them, they're pretty quick. Like how much, especially once you become familiar with what to look for. Oh my goodness, it becomes so easy. Um, and then you can start making predictions about what to expect in the future. Like how willing, if they don't have much of a attention span, they're not going to engage with a lot of information. And if they, don't have a high level of activity, they're not going to care about being included in things and want to show up to stuff all the time. And like, your overtures of inclusion aren't going to mean much to them. It's not going to matter. And if they're not emotionally stable, they're not going to be. So they're just, if they're fussy all the time, they're going to be fussy. And then you just have to expect that that's going to continue to be the case, even when they have these moments like, oh, bros, I'm trying to get better, and like, I know I put a lot of burden on you guys, and I appreciate that you put up with me. And they play the remorse game. It doesn't matter. It's all emotional. It's all emotional, and it's just like their whole game, their whole cycle, of pain and remorse and this and that, and it's just you're gonna have to put up with that, okay? And if you can't handle that, you can't handle that. So that's if it's too hot in the kitchen, stay out. That's kind of like a thing with emotional stability is that we can play the blame game and go in a circle with this, but at the end of the day, it's just like people are what they are. They're born a certain way, and then they either did or didn't get help from their parents, and it's kind of fucked, and they're just kind of fucked, and then we're all fucked having to deal with it, and it just and you just have to know, like, can I put up with it? What do I have to do to protect myself when I can't? It's almost not even personal at a certain point when you're just like when you just can't handle certain people. That's totally it is what it is. We try our best, but like this is something that you have to consider. So these three are really important, and I wish more people consider emotional stability because it's kind of a big factor in social interaction. Because a temperament's not going to change, bro. It's not going to change. Like this is the thing. I mean, I'm being practical here. It could change, but temperament. Well, no. Even you know what? No, I'm not even going to put nonsense in your head. Temperament, okay, is childish. Personality starts when you're an adult, when you're a young adult. When you move out of being a child, you're no longer a child, bro. You're now a young adult, is when you have a fully formed, stable adult identity of a personality, what's called a personality. Then we move away from these traits and start looking for the 5-factor model. We look for the for ocean traits. This only applies to kids. So if people are still like once you reach adulthood, okay, this isn't going to change. You can change, and with a lot of effort and consciousness and willpower, you can change, and help, you can change your and even medication, you can change your personality traits, your adult personality, because that's an adaptation that you made. It's just a construct you made up, right? A persona, a mask, your personality. So, but this is not a personality. You didn't choose this. You don't get to make this up. This is what it is. And if it's not changed in early childhood, if it's not influenced enough, and there's not trauma or something happening to change this early on, it's going to get fixed at a certain point because it forms the foundation of personality. And it's really hard, nigh impossible, to go back and undo that foundation once it's there and you've built on it, and you're trying to, you can't stop the inertia of continuing to move forward and grow as you grow up. You can't stop growing up, is what I'm saying. And so you're just, it's continuously further and further out of reach. Those formative years is what they call them. And that's why it's so super important. There's a huge aegis of responsibility on parents to have good parenting skills and learn about child development and stuff at least a little bit, have cursory knowledge a little bit of how to adapt to different children and identify what their baby's temperament is going to be so that they know what to do and how to raise their kids, and not just like put them down for being a certain way or something. Because like a parent with a high activity level who's really energetic, and then also a baby with the same thing, could be very difficult for the parent because the parent already is spending all their energy and doesn't have any left for the child who's also energetic and needs a lot of attention. And so, or it could be the other way around. It could be a parent who has a very low energy level and doesn't like all this like high intensity energetic behavior, and then the baby is just getting into everything, a finger in every pie, and trying to knock over everything and just mess with the dog and just everything and causing problems and screaming. And then the parent can't handle that high activity, high intensity, and then is trying to like change the child. And to some extent, maybe that's a good thing. It's reining it in. But then if the parent doesn't do it responsibly, it can be oppressive or tyrannical, and that can cause like a neurotic complex or something that the child forms about that behavior, where it feels bad about it or something. And so you see how this is all starting to work. So this is really important. You got to memorize this stuff. It's really simple. You can see it in people, and it's going to be like the roots that grow into the tree of personality. And then if personality can be modified, and really when you want to focus on change, you want to think about changing your personality, but even that is going to be very difficult. It's a hard road, because the longer you've had a certain personality trait that you've depended on and relied upon, and it's been like sort of a core of your belief structure, the harder it's going to be to change that later, the older you get. And I would say approaching 30s is when your personality starts to get really set in, and it's very hard to change your personality after that. 40s, after your midlife crisis, and whenever, if you have one or not, but like around your 30s or 40s, beyond then, you see in seniors and older people, their personality is almost set in stone. It's really hard they become super stubborn, and for good reason. So they've come a long way. And temperament is long behind them, so they're full into their personality. Um, yeah, so you have a better chance of changing your personality traits when you're younger, when you're like a teenager or you're in your early 20s or something. That's when you can't change this stuff. But I'll get into personality in my next video, and I'll talk about that. So that's a good stopping point. Yeah, I'll get into in my next video. I'll continue on, and I'll put up the thing with the ocean, and I'll talk about that stuff. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was informative. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.